We are also dealing in an environment, as I said to you, that is increasingly unstable internationally. Without question or doubt, Donald Trump was brought in, and listen, and this is where I don't have a problem. Donald Trump was brought in saying, I'm going to do this, and it didn't matter what it was. He had a quite clear set of things, and he said he was going to do it. Not just a majority of the states of the United States of America in the Electoral College, but a majority of Americans, which was extraordinary for a Republican candidate, voted for Donald Trump. And so, unsurprisingly, and who should be surprised, that a man who said, I've come in to disrupt the scheme, is disrupting it, particularly given that he's promised it, and now he's imposed tariffs upon Canada, Mexico, and China. The suggestion of taxes against the European community, who he believes are involved also in particular in unfair trade practices. And New Zealand at the moment is desperately trying to make sure that we don't end up caught in the midst. The United States is our second largest export source, meat, dairy, wool. I think that, meat, dairy, and wine, not wool, wine. I think they are our primary exports to the United States of America. And the last thing that New Zealand needs at this time for our economy is to be hit by tariffs and for that particular market to suddenly become problematic, would be the best way to describe it. You've seen some of those frustrations in the last 24 hours with the sacking of the New Zealand's High Commissioner to London, which is ironic when you think about it. Joining us to talk about that and where to from here, and we've had Stephen Jacobi on before. Extensive diplomatic, trade and government experience. He was the Deputy High Commissioner in Ottawa was our next guest, Stephen Jacobi. He was the Assistant Trade Commissioner in Paris. He's been an advisor on trade and diplomatic issues with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And steeped, it has to be said, in trade and diplomacy. He now runs his own consultancy, advising business and government clients in the fields of international trade and economic development, Jacobi Consulting. Stephen joins us now. Welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on again.
Very nice to be here again, Michael. Thanks very much.
Stephen, you would have heard my background on the trade issue, and obviously in the last 24 hours we've seen the sensitivities involved because the last thing we need is anybody getting in the way. We've had Trade Ministers Macleay over there already, worry as to how far they can get into the White House to put New Zealand's special message. Can you give us some overview of what you think the issues are likely to be for New Zealand in the next wee while and how they're likely to handle them?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that it's about trying to work out how New Zealand is going to be affected and what obviously we can do to mitigate the risks. I mean, no one really believes that New Zealand is going to be targeted by the Trump administration, for the things that we do in international trade. We're a small player. We have a small surplus with the United States, but it is very, very small. We have complementary economies. We don't apply massive tariffs to the US, products coming into New Zealand. There are lots of reasons why you wouldn't want to start with New Zealand, but there is the risk of getting caught in the crossfire. So I think the, decisions that are applied across the board could well apply to us. We saw with steel and aluminium tariffs, for example, that was precisely what happened. Now there's an investigation around wood products underway. Again, small amounts of exports to the United States in wood, about a couple of 100 million. But the wood industry won't be very happy if that market is taken away from them. So we've really got to work out how it's going to apply to us. And I'm sure the embassy in Washington, under the instructions of Trade Minister Macleay, is doing all it can to call in all the favours from all our friends and people that we know to try to get a handle on the situation and to present the New Zealand's case. But the fact of the matter is, right now, Michael, no one really knows what is going to happen. Canada and Mexico thought they knew what was going to happen earlier this week, but this morning we discovered that they've been given another temporary reprieve. But all things are heading towards the 2nd of April. On the 1st of April, trade agencies in the United States, and we discussed it when I was last on your show, on the 1st of April, trade agencies in the United States have been instructed to report back to the administration on a wide range of trade issues, including all the ones related to Canada and Mexico and motor vehicles and the need for reciprocal tariffs and the nasty things that other governments do to the United States, etc., etc. 1st of April. 2nd of April, big day for the administration to take decisions on those matters. That's the day that the president has now said that Canada and Mexico's case is going to be reviewed again. So I think all traffic pointing to the 2nd of April at this moment. But hey, who can be sure about what might happen? And we need to, I think, bide our time, do our homework, and be careful what we say.
Yeah, we do, which is why Phil Goff doesn't have a job today. But having said that, I'm interested in the personality of these tariffs, because although there's a policy, you can see a policy argument for them. Donald Trump, again, as you say, has just suspended for a month the tariffs between the United States of America, Canada, and Mexico. And in part, he said, quote, he chose to temporarily suspend tariffs on Mexico, quote, as an accommodation and out of respect for the country's president, Claudia Sheinbaum. Our relationship's been a very good one. We're working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens from entering the US and likewise stopping fentanyl. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation. There seems a peculiar personal aspect to tariff application and suspension, doesn't there, Stephen?
Of course, we talked a bit about this when I was last on the show, and I recall that you pushed me quite hard on tariffs and applicability and how useful, and we were talking about, in the New Zealand context, historically and all that sort of stuff. So there are differing views on tariffs. I'm not sure we quite see eye to eye on that. But anyway, what I think in this case is interesting, though, in relation to the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, the justification that has been used so far is under this International Emergency Economic Powers Act, an unusual act to justify tariffs. And you've got the arguments around immigration and fentanyl. That is quite different from the justification that's being advanced for the consideration of broader tariffs, which are more around economic matters like protection of US manufacturing or protection against surges in imports. So this International Emergency Economic Powers Act is a stopgap measure, I think, not really very well designed for tariff imposition, and therefore, I suppose, personal factors and more in particularly, I think, policies taken by Canada and Mexico to respond to, the president's urgings, are probably more important. But when we come to the 2nd of April, when it's really the economics that's going to be examined and the trade law and legislation is going to be invoked, I think we might see that a little differently.
But President Trump and the White House have also, President Trump and the White House have also been pointing out, their business secretary in particular, that they have a trade imbalance with the European community as well. So their beef is not simply with their two NAFTA partners or previous partners, but also, or with China, but also with the European community as well. Is there a particular underlying philosophy, do you think, that's driving the United States? I mean, put the fentanyl and immigration arguments to one side, as you have. What is the argument that the United States is using? Is it saying that we want a trade balance with you? Or is it saying, no, we don't want to do business with you. Any import substitution is a good thing for us. We want those jobs to come back home, and that's why we're applying the tariffs. We want those businesses back home.
I think the latter is the point. The justification that is being advanced is that the imposition of tariffs is good for the American economy, good for American manufacturing, good for American jobs, and could even be useful for revenue raising. All of these arguments are, of course, are not. They've been around for a long time. Even once in New Zealand, we subscribed to a sort of a fortress view of our own economy. I'm thinking prior to the big reforms in '84, but there are other elements impinging on that argument today, I would suggest, and in particular, all that's happened since, the integration of the North American economies has come into effect, because while tariffs might be advanced as an argument for protecting jobs, in a North American context where you have not a US economy, but a North American economy in manufacturing, whether for motor vehicles or a range of other products, and in a world where products are made in the world today, not just in one country, the imposition of tariffs actually does the opposite. It takes away jobs, it makes things more expensive, and it deprives economies of innovation and economies of scale and all those sorts of things. But you're right, there is an economic argument, not one I subscribe to, but I mean there is an argument, an economic argument behind these moves, and it'll be judged on the effect it has on economic performance.
Well, I mean, in some ways it's irrelevant what you and I think, because it's what the White House thinks, and Tim.
That's what they think. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. So you and I can have this prosaic little argument about whether or not tariffs should or shouldn't exist. It's what they think that's obviously going to happen.